Sri Ganeshaya Namaha, Sri Saraswati Namaha, Sri Padavallabha Narasimha Saraswati, Sri Guru Dattatreya Namaha. Dattatreya Mahatmanam Varadam Bhaktavatsalam Prapannartiharam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Deenabandhum Kripasindhum Sarvakarana Karanam Sarvarakshakaram Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Sharanagata Deenartha Paritrana Parayanam Narayanam Vibhum Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Sarvanarthaharam Devam Sarvamangalamangalam Sarvakleshaharam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Brahmanyam Dharma Tattvajnam Bhakta Kirti Vivardhanam Bhaktabhishta-pradam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Shoshanam Papa Pankasya Deepanam Jnana Tejasa Tapa Prashamanam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Sarvaroga Prashamanam Sarva Pida Nivaranam Vipaduddharanam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Janma Samsara Bandhagnam Swarupanandadayakam Nishreyasapadam Vande Smartrugami Sanovatu Jayanamaya Shakkama Dhatur Dattasya Stavam Bhoga Moksha Pradasyemam Prapatet Sakrimave Sri Ganeshaya Namaha, Sri Saraswati Namaha, Sri Padavallabha Narasimha Saraswati, Sri Guru Dattatreya Namaha.
Therefore, O Mahendra, even Mantra Shastras and Tantra Shastras can bestow liberation, provided there is a keen and purified intellect and truth and non-injury are practiced. Are you listening, Kartaveerya? In this story, the conflict in the Shastras mentioned by you has also been dealt with. As you see, there is no conflict between the scriptures. But if someone imagines conflict, it is his fault. They may tread the respective paths according to their understanding and inclination. Listen to some more stories and the matter will become clearer. Kartaveerya, the next 4 stories took place in Matapura. A great devotee by name Vishnadatta lived there. He was my devotee, and I praise him and hold him in high esteem. I am deeply moved when I remember his name. Listen to his story in the words of Brihaspati himself. You will become purified by listening to these tales. The emperor was impressed by the words of the Lord. As he was listening intently, the Lord continued. Kartaveerya, Brihaspati began to narrate the story thus. Devendra, these stories confer great merit. As they are very dear to Lord Datta, listen to them earnestly. 4. Regular performance of one's duty. There is a place called Matapura near Sahyadri, where lived a Brahmin called Vishnadatta. He was very well versed in the study of the Vedas and steadfast in practice. His wife Sushila was highly devoted and virtuous. I lack the ability to describe that noble couple's steadfastness, austerities, and desirelessness. They had no worries about anyone in the world. They lived in a world of their own, simply following their religious practices. If the villagers gave him some grain, considering him a good Brahmin, that was great wealth for them. Gradually, even the villagers ceased to take any notice of them. There was a peepal tree in front of their house, and a Brahma Rakshasa was living on it. He used to collect and eat the grains of boiled rice offered daily to all living creatures by Vishnadatta after performing sacrifices to all deities. Therefore, the Brahma Rakshasa did not harm that couple. Instead, he used to catch hold of others and torment them. Gradually, the thought occurred to him that it was a sin to harm others. He was himself surprised at this. By degrees, his piety increased more and more. He soon realized that all this was the result of the Vaishvadeva offerings made by that pious Brahmin. As his goodness increased, a sense of gratitude began to grow in him, and it culminated in the feeling of wanting to return their kindness. One day, he became bold enough to appear in his true form before Vishnadatta, who was placing the offerings of boiled rice under the tree. The Brahmin was frightened on seeing his hideous and terrible form, but the Brahma Rakshasa told him not to be afraid, and expressing his gratitude, told Vishnadatta that he wanted to repay his kindness and that he could ask him anything he wanted. The Brahma Rakshasa was as polite as it was possible for him to be. Vishnadatta was quite puzzled. The Brahma Rakshasa was pressing him to say what he wanted. But however much he tried, he could not think of anything he wanted. The Brahma Rakshasa did not give up and would not leave him. At last, Vishnadatta thought he would better consult his wife. She too could not think of any wish at first. After much thinking, however, an idea came to her. She told her husband, "Have you not been wishing for a long time for Lord Dattatreya's darshan? The Brahma Rakshasa obviously possesses great powers. He may perhaps be able to arrange this." Her suggestion appealed to him very much, and he told the Brahma Rakshasa accordingly. Hardly had the Brahma Rakshasa heard the name Dattatreya when he jumped up and sprang back, scared. He said menacingly, "O Brahmin, you have lost your direction. Do not ever repeat that name. If we Rakshasas just hear that name, our hearts burst and we are dead. How could I lead you to him? Can anything be more unjust than this?" Vishnadatta was distressed and said, "Well, you seem to possess superhuman powers. That is why I asked you, believing that nothing is impossible for you. Forget it then. I do not want anything. I shall regard it as if you have done me a favor, so do not worry." Because of his new inner piety, the Brahma Rakshasa would not even think of going back on his promise. But he could not consider undertaking this hazard. After much haggling, he came to a decision and said, "O Brahmin, I cannot think of cheating you. You are so stubborn and say that you do not want anything else. All right, I shall do as you wish, but on one condition. He whom you mentioned is a great yogi. More than that, he is a great conjurer, and he can assume incredible disguises. He moves about in forbidden places. I shall find out where he is and come back and show him to you from a distance. Then, without wavering, you must go and catch hold of his feet. I myself cannot come near him. Remember to catch hold of his feet and to serve him with faith. But I warn you, I will not take you to him more than 3 times. Then my promise is fulfilled." So saying, the Brahma Rakshasa went away. Later, he appeared suddenly and in a trembling voice said, "Come with me," and took Vishnadatta to a meat shop. A madman was there, moving around and begging for pieces of meat. His appearance was terrible, and his face was very frightening. His eyes were big and fiery like the embers of wood. He seemed to be drunk, and toddy was dripping from all over him. Now swaying, now staggering, now falling, and then getting up, he moved to and fro unsteadily. When he moved, the flies swarming all over his body would fly off. Flashing his fiery eyes, it looked as though he was searching for an opportunity to strangle someone. Pointing him out from a distance, the Brahma Rakshasa said, "Look, that madman there. He is your Datta. Run and catch hold of his feet," and ran away with fear. The best among Brahmins felt as though an apple had stuck in his throat and a boulder had fallen on his chest. His first problem was how to bear that horrible smell. Oh dear, after leading such a pure life, now I have to go to such an awful place out of friendship for a Rakshasa? Is it true, as this Rakshasa says, that this horrible fellow of improper conduct is Lord Dattatreya? The Rakshasa did not seem to be joking. But could one imagine that Lord Dattatreya, the beloved son of Atri and Anasuya, would be like this? Even if he is an Avadhoota, how can he be so ghastly? But the Brahma Rakshasa appears to be credible. What does he gain by deceiving me? Perhaps he is speaking the truth. Still, how can a scholar of Vedas enter such a shop? How can I go in there and touch that awful person? What will those who see this say of me? If only I knew what I should do. While the Brahmin was thinking thus, the madman disappeared. While the Brahmin was looking for him here and there, wondering what had happened to him, the Brahma Rakshasa came back and said, "Oh, Brahmin, I told you in the beginning that person is a great deceiver. His looks are terrifying. I told you that you would not believe me. When Saturn is on the center of the head, what can anyone do? This chance is wasted. But I shall show him to you again. At least then, have some sense in you." The Brahmin shivered. Truly, what I did was a mistake. The Lord is the ruler of dharma and adharma. The Vedas are his breath. The worlds are his toys. What rule of conduct can there be for him? What impropriety? My intellect stopped functioning. I did not pass the Lord's test. Thus, Vishnudatta felt great remorse. After a few days, the Brahma Rakshasa came again in a hurry, and saying, "Come, he is moving about nearby," took Vishnudatta to a cemetery. There was a butcher in the midst of a heap of charred human bones. Dogs surrounded him. Together with the dogs, he had dragged out a half-burnt corpse from the pyre and appeared to be eating it. His eyes were like embers of tamarind wood. There was a garland of bones round his neck, and intestines were garlands for the ears. His entire body was smeared with blood. That was his frightening form. Pointing him out, the Brahma Rakshasa said, "Look, there is your Lord. Be careful." And he ran away as fast as he could. Vishnudatta had come this time with an alert intellect, determined that in whatever form the Lord might be, he should not get confused. He did not have any doubt this time, but he was afraid. Yet he controlled himself and, trembling, went near him and prostrated. When the butcher turned aside, his body seemed to be in flames. He struck Vishnudatta with the bone in his hand. Poor Vishnudatta felt as if his life was on the point of ebbing out. In the meanwhile, the dogs had begun to bark and attack him. By now the Brahmin was beside himself with terror. He put all his strength in the legs and ran and ran. When he reached home, he collapsed. The Brahma Rakshasa, sitting on the peepal tree, laughed hilariously and taunted him thus. "Hey, Mr. Pandit, I did not think you could run so fast. Fortune is not with you. Dattatreya's tests are not easy. You are not the only one to fail. I had hoped that this time you would withstand. Why should I bother myself with it? I shall take you once more, if you dare come again." So saying, the Brahma Rakshasa disappeared. Feeling a deep sense of shame, Vishnudatta sat on his doorstep, where his wife Sushila found him and comforted him with affectionate words. My poor husband, you have striven so much, yet fortune did not favor you. Let us forget it. The merit we have is enough. This Rakshasa has said that the Lord is a big conjurer. Why should you stretch your hands for grapes which cannot be reached? But for Vishnudatta, his attachment to the body was an unbearable thorn in his heart. How could I run away fearing that this body would be injured? So he felt a sense of shame and guilt while he carried out his religious practices. One day the Brahmarakshasa came and called him again. This time he was not scared. "O Brahmin," said the Brahmarakshasa, "according to my promise, I will take you for the third and last time. You have lost 2 chances already. Bear this in mind and don't waste this chance." Now it was evident that he did not believe that the Brahmin would withstand the test. Vishnudatta followed the Brahmarakshasa with desperate determination. Can there be a fool equal to me? How could I have attributed defects to the Lord himself and accused him of improper conduct? What an unfortunate person I am, that even though I knew very well that he is the one and only Lord who has all the worlds under his protection, and even after seeing him with my own eyes, I fled, overtaken by fear, afraid that my body would be injured. This must not happen again. It is the final test for me. There are only 2 options: to obtain the Lord's grace or to perish. This time, the Brahmarakshasa took him to a Harijan, outcast, untouchable colony. There, a Harijan was taking out flesh from dead asses and working on the hide. The Harijan was throwing bits of meat to the crows, eagles, and nearby dogs and playing with them. Pointing him out to the Brahmin, the Brahmarakshasa ran away. There was not a fraction of doubt in Vishnudatta's mind now. He did not have the slightest fear. Moving forward quickly, he fell at his feet and caught hold of them firmly, saying, "Lord, I seek your protection. Please have mercy on me." The Harijan kicked the Brahmin in the face and abused him. He even spat on him and beat him and tortured him in various ways. Whatever the Harijan did, Vishnudatta did not leave his feet. Even when he hurt him so much, Vishnudatta uttered only one word: "Lord, protection." With tightly closed eyes, he clutched the Lord's feet more firmly and was uttering, "Lord, protection," as though he did not know any other words, when suddenly he heard a gentle voice saying, "What can I do for you?" Vishnudatta was overcome by the sweetness of the Lord's words. Not only sweetness, there was nectar in those words. Without giving up the Lord's feet, Vishnudatta lifted up his head and opened his eyes. Before him was the gracious Lord, wearing ochre-colored robes. On his lips, a splendor excelling moonlight caused by radiant smiles, overflowing with compassion. Moonlight of the form of bliss was emanating from the immaculate Lord, who was sitting on a decorated seat placed on the sacrificial grass. Vishnudatta looked around in wonderment. Where were the dogs, the carcass, the crows, and the eagles? The Harijan colony also had disappeared. An enchanting tapovan, a penance grove, was there instead. Marvelous tranquility and infinite effulgence reigned. The indefinable Lord was there, surrounded by divine bliss. Vishnudatta's heart overflowed with joy. Without any effort, he got up and circumambulated the Lord thrice. From his mouth flowed mantras of the 4 Vedas in praise of the Lord, like the flow of Ganga. In that blissful state, he was not conscious of what he was doing, he bowed again and again, his eyes full of tears of joy. He extolled and touched the Lord and said, "O my Lord, I experience a great sense of fulfillment having touched your feet. Is there anyone who does not feel that he has achieved his highest goal when you reveal yourself? Lord, what an ocean of compassion you are." These were not mere words, rather he was in a state of ecstasy. Those who are seized by that divine frenzy are fortunate, and Vishnudatta felt he was the most fortunate among them. The Lord also was supremely happy on seeing his elated devotee. He gently lifted up Vishnudatta and said, "The best among Vipras, a singer of Vedic hymns. Ask what you want." The devoted Brahmin was again faced with a problem. Previously, both husband and wife had somehow thought of a request. If a request had to be made now, where should it come from? That was the poor Brahmin's problem. To consult his wife again was out of question. After all, what could she come up with? In front of him, the Lord was waiting. To delay would amount to an offense, as it would if he said that he did not want anything. What should he do? Suddenly an idea came to him, who was so devoted to religious duties. At once he prostrated to the Lord and said, "Lord, tomorrow my father's death anniversary will be observed at our house. Could you honor us by attending?" The Lord was overjoyed. The selflessness in the Brahmin's request pleased the Lord. If the Lord comes as a guest, all the mains will attain liberation. That is a great satisfaction for me, was the Brahmin's idea. The Lord said, "I shall come to your house tomorrow noon. Be ready." Evening was then approaching. Turning to Vishnudatta, the Lord said, "My time of silence is very near. Make your water offering to the gods in the river and reach your home before darkness sets in." Vishnudatta did not get any sleep that night. On seeing her husband's ecstasy, the wife also could not sleep. Both of them were seized by great excitement. "Tomorrow the Lord will come to our house. What should we do when he comes? How should we receive him? How should we seat him? What food should be cooked? What courteous treatment should be given, and at what time?" At every word they were absorbed in joyful anticipation. The whole night was full of datta to that virtuous couple. Until the dawn and the time for the daily rites approached, they kept talking about Lord Dattatreya. Afterwards, while Vishnudatta was performing his daily rites, he kept imagining that the Lord had arrived. He jumped even at the sound of an ant. He shrunk with fear when a fly moved. His wife Sushila was in the same state. Even when she had prepared many dishes, it did not satisfy her. She was in a dilemma as to whether the Lord would like the dish or not, whether a particular item would be good enough or not. She prepared a variety of food and many kinds of dishes. Finally, the Lord came. The couple welcomed him with enthusiasm and courteous attention and seated him on an appropriate seat. The Lord was in a pleasant mood and delighted them with wise words. After conversing with the Lord for a while, Sushila went into the kitchen, and the Guru and the disciple discussed subjects from the scriptures. The housewife returned and announced that everything was ready. Then the Lord looked at Vishnudatta and said, "Yes, but where is the other guest? Surely you have invited another Brahmin suitable to me." Vishnudatta's face turned pale. His only thought had been that the Lord would come. There was no other thought in his mind. Until the Lord reminded him, he had not thought of the custom of inviting another Brahmin. Recovering a little, he said, "Lord, my wife usually takes care of such matters. As you are the greatest of guests, She will definitely have arranged for a suitable guest. I shall inquire and come back." And going inside, he talked to his wife. But she was in the same predicament. Until then it had not occurred to her. What should they do? The wife recovered and said, "All right, leave the matter to me. First bathe the Lord and seat him on a wooden seat." Vishnudatta went back to the Lord and said, "She will attend to everything, do not worry. Please have your bath." While the Lord seemed to be just bathing, he was in fact carefully observing the couple's conduct. Inside the house, not knowing what to do, the wife went to the backyard. There she saw the sun in the sky. As soon as she saw the sun god, an idea occurred to her. Folding her hands, she praised that friend of the world. "Lord, you are the stimulator of all intellects. There is nothing unknown to you. Lord Dattatreya is our guest, and he wants the company of another Brahmin. Lord, you alone can help us." The sun god in the sky was startled. "Should I go to the dinner at the death anniversary?" But it was the wish of the supremely virtuous Sushila. Besides, Lord Datta was waiting. As though bound by a mantra, the sun god took a human form and, appearing before her in the guise of a Brahmin, said, "Mother, I shall act as you desire." She worshipped the sun god properly and told him to come after bathing. Lord Datta observed what happened with astonishment. Vishnudatta was happy that the second Brahmin had come in time and announced with pleasure, "Lord, another Brahmin has come now." But the Lord wanted to test him further. He said to Vishnudatta, "Do you want to complete the death anniversary with only 2 Brahmins? Have you not arranged for a Brahmin separately for the place of Vishnu?" Vishnudatta's face turned pale again. With 2 Brahmins only, the death anniversary could be performed well in conformity with the scriptures. There is no need for a 3rd Brahmin. But the Lord is now insisting on a 3rd Brahmin. To ascertain whether his wife had invited anyone, he went inside and said, "The Lord says that it would be better if a 3rd Brahmin were here. Have you invited anyone else?" With wide eyes she looked at him in surprise. Recovering instantly, she said, "The 3rd Brahmin will come. Leave it to me. You go and commence worship." Sushila pondered over what was to be done, and then her eyes fell on the 3 sacred fires on the platform. She took courage and chanted, "Namaste Garhapatyaya, Namaste Dakshinagnaye, Namaste Ahavaniyaya." Salutations to the householder's fire. Salutations to the southern fire. Salutations to the sacrificial fire. She folded her hands and, meditating upon Agnideva, prayed thus, "O Lord, you are the master of the house. You are ever worshipful to us. Therefore I am begging you to help us." Agnideva knew her power very well. Without delay he came out of the fire pit in the guise of a Brahmin. She worshipped him with due devotion and asked him to have a bath. Vishnudatta was happy that a 3rd Brahmin also had been found in time. Lord Datta was filled with surprise and pleasure at the power and devotion of the jewel among virtuous and dedicated wives, as well as the humility of the couple. The sun god, Agnideva, and Lord Datta himself were now the guests. O Mahendra, such a death anniversary has neither taken place in the past nor will it take place in the future. After the guests had eaten, Vishnudatta performed the rites of the death anniversary and then had all the 3 guests rest for a while. He was extremely happy. By the grace of the Lord, the ritual of the death anniversary had taken place in an extraordinary way. In that joyous state he prostrated to the Lord again and praised him with 108 names, which came to him as an intuition. Listening to that matchless praise, the Lord went into complete rapture. Vishnudatta, you are the best among Brahmins. Your devotion is supreme. The wonderful praise with 108 names has emanated from your mouth as a great inspiration. To those who recite them daily with devotion, I shall be as gracious as I am to the experts of yoga. I shall grant any boons they ask. This is a great favor which I am bestowing on the whole world out of love for you. Redemption of the world is achieved by persons like you. Out of love for you, I shall fulfill all your wishes. Don't hesitate, but ask for a boon. Since the Lord was thus persuading him to ask, at last Vishnudatta said, My Lord, the cause for this happiness is the Brahma Rakshasa living in front of my house. Please favor him. The Lord burst out laughing. Then the Lord began to press him again and said, Vishnudatta, is there anything still left for me to do for him? Merely by eating your Vaishvadeva offerings and sacrifices, his sins stand destroyed. Since he has helped you, blessings are already waiting for him. I will grant him residence in heaven till the end of the kalpa. This is his boon. Now ask what you want. However, the couple could not think of anything to ask. The sun god and fire god who were by his side were looking on with wonder. Should they not at least ask for liberation? In the end, the Lord himself spoke. He said, Vishnudatta, Datta is in your name. You are yourself Datta. Your wife also is as much Datta as you are. I have been observing her influence. You alone are her equal. She alone is fit for you. I know you have nothing to ask. Those who have no knowledge of the truth ask for salvation. They do not know that salvation cannot be given. The statement that desire for salvation is good is meant for the unknowing. I know your noble feelings, yet I cannot leave without giving you something. Therefore, all of your mains have attained the eternal Brahmaloka as a result of this death anniversary. Now, is there anyone in your lineage who is not on the path of salvation? As for you, there is nothing you want. You have conquered even the desire for liberation. You have achieved the art of doing everything without desire. In fact, there is not any work that can bind you. Vishnudatta, I therefore want you to do a little of my work. I shall give you a mantra. If you worship and meditate on it, you will attain whatever you desire, and long life, health, wealth, power of kingdom. Not only will you attain this, you can also confer on others whatever favor you want by the power of this mantra. So saying, the Lord taught him the mantra, placed both of his hands on the heads of the couple, and disappeared. When they realized that Lord Dattatreya had gone, they still did not feel that he had really left them. Therefore, they were not sad. The sun god and the fire god, who witnessed the eminence of that couple, were full of admiration, and both of them gave them many boons themselves. The sun god conferred the benefit of walking in space and unrestrained movement, and the assurance that he would appear whenever remembered. Agnideva bestowed the boon of incomparable brilliance, establishment in truth, and power to give happiness, and said, If you just remember me, I shall come and do your work. Both of them returned to their respective regions. Then the former Brahma Rakshasa took his seat in a celestial chariot and went to the celestial regions after having obtained Vishnudatta's permission. You see, Mahendra, Vishnudatta attained extraordinary achievement in that very birth, performing his obligatory duties without desires. Therefore, Devendra, it is obvious that it is not important which path or scripture one follows. One should perform one's duties to the best of one's abilities, with reliability and devotion. Most importantly, one should do everything without desire for the fruits of one's actions. If one does everything with such detachment, then whatever one does will elevate one. All of one's undertakings should be devoid of planning and desire for results. Look at Vishnadatta. He did not perform extraordinary deeds. He did not have wells dug, nor did he construct tanks. He did not build temples and towers, nor did he perform sacrifices all the time. He achieved his power with his wise intellect, his integrity, his truthfulness, non-injury, purity, and self-restraint. More than anything, he achieved it through his contentment, detachment, and desirelessness. The same is true for his wife Sushila. It is for this reason that the story of that virtuous couple is a great example for all devotees. After narrating the story up to this point, Brihaspati fell silent, moved by the thought of the saintly couple. Looking at him, Indra said, "Gurudeva, I have listened to this story which confers much merit. You had said that you would narrate 7 stories called Saptodaharini, 7 examples. So far, you have told 4 stories. I am eager to know what Vishnadatta did afterwards. Please favor me by telling this." Pleased by Indra's keen interest, Brihaspati began thus. "Mahendra, your wish will be fulfilled. The 3 stories to be told next concerned Vishnadatta. The stories narrated until now illustrated how the different traditions mentioned in the scriptures give spiritual achievement to the respective seekers according to their taste and eligibility. But virtues such as truthfulness, non-injury, and integrity are necessary for all aspirants and are the basis of all striving. But in normal life, people's tendencies are rather complex. Their desires and tendencies sometimes contradict each other. In this case, discrimination has to be used. Without discrimination, all the scriptures seem contradictory. For instance, those who are deluded by ignorance may think that Ayurveda Shastra shows the way to happiness by keeping the body healthy, or that Dharma Shastra prescribes the way to attain heaven and other upper regions, or that Mantra and Tantra Shastras teach us how to cast a spell on one's foes, or that Shastras like Mimamsa show the way to obtain rewards both here and hereafter through sacrifices. The purpose of the Shastras is to show various ways of obtaining happiness and to make those absorbed in worldly activities gradually turn to the supreme truth. Then they will realize that Ayurveda shows the way to destroy obstacles to austerities. Dharma Shastra is the path of purity of the mind. Mantra Shastra teaches the way to conquer inner enemies, and that Mimamsa and other Shastras show how samsara causes delusion and assumes that the body is the Atman. Thus, the respective Shastras employ a device to appeal to individuals not yet ready for the ultimate truth. You cannot instruct the meaning of the sentence, "Thou art that," to aspirants who are ridden with desires and diseases. They would not listen, and even if they did, they would not understand it. Suffering should be reduced to remove obstacles in the spiritual path. First, one has to lessen their suffering. Then they will be more inclined to believe. Devotion will increase and faith will develop. Then they are ready to listen to what is said. The next 3 stories I am about to tell will explain this with examples. they also include references to Vishnu Datta. 5. Patience. Even after obtaining great boons from Lord Datta and attaining amazing power, there was not a trace of vanity or pride in Vishnu Datta. Just as the ocean does not overflow when all the great rivers enter it, Vishnu Datta remained even-minded. He was kind to everyone and he never exhibited his powers before others. Though he was living in his house like fire enveloped by ashes, his saintliness spread all over the country like the fragrance of the jasmine flower. He helped people without any desire for rewards and without thinking that he was the one who acted thus. At a short distance from Matapura, there was a place of pilgrimage called Kushavarta. The large number of learned Brahmins living there spent their time in groups studying Vedas and Vedangas. To one among them, owing to some sin committed by him, a son was born who was afflicted with acute gout from birth. Even after he came of age, the affliction did not decrease. Yet, even before he had attained marriageable age, his parents performed his marriage. The girl by the name of Sumedha was as sparkling as light. The poor girl did not know anything about her husband. Before she came of age, both his parents passed away. By that time, her husband, already suffering from acute gout, developed dropsy, which culminated in tuberculosis. There was nobody now to care for him in this awful state. Sumedha was still a young girl, a girl who should have been enjoying a carefree youth. What a virtuous soul she was! In order to save her husband, she left her parents' house and went to look after him, as the eyelid would the eye. Seeing her doing the work of both husband and wife, and serving her husband as if she were his own mother, the whole town was astonished. But his diseases increased day by day. As though the diseases he was already suffering from were not enough, he also caught dysentery and heart disease. Since all the treatments he was given proved futile, the girl, for the sake of her husband's health, observed whatever rites anyone suggested. While wives of her age were moving about freely with their husbands, this poor girl was nursing her husband day and night, emaciating her body by taking up new discipline all the time. She worshipped every deity and observed all sorts of religious vows. In spite of all this, her husband did not improve even in the slightest. Then, one day, the girl learnt of Vishnu Datta's powers. As she had heard about Lord Datta's greatness before, hope was kindled in her that Vishnu Datta might be able to do something for her husband. Though she wanted to take the patient to Vishnu Datta, he was not in a position to move. Finally, she asked her father to help and went with him to consult Vishnu Datta. On seeing him, the girl was deeply impressed and moved. So loving and compassionate he was. Her heart opened to him, and covering her face with the border of the sari, she sobbed loudly. Vishnu Datta could see both the past and the future. His heart melted with compassion for the girl, yet, following the usual procedures, asked her about her problem and cheering her said, "Why should we fear when Lord Dattatreya is among us?" Then he agreed to go to Kushavarta with them. By the time they reached the house, the disorder of the three humors in the patient's body had increased, and he was unconscious, due to high delirious fever. He did not respond when called. When Sumedha saw her husband in that state, her heart seemed to break. Crying loudly, she caught hold of Vishnu Datta's feet and said, "Oh, Vishnu Datta, I beg you to cure my husband." Though moved with pity, Vishnu Datta was immersed in a state of perfect inner peace. He thought, "With the divine powers granted by Lord Dattatreya, I can cure all these diseases in an instant. But with that, nothing will really have been achieved. He will live, that's all. Of what use is that?" he should live and become virtuous. He should not again commit the sins he committed in his previous lives. Not only that, he should also advance spiritually. To that aim, he should develop interest in the good deeds recommended by the scriptures. He should be made to experience directly that by performing expiatory acts in accordance with the scriptures, all former sins are destroyed and diseases cured, and that by observing rites, merit accrues and real happiness is attained. If this happens, he will follow the scriptures as long as he lives and eventually attain fulfillment. Without this, will it be worthwhile for me to exhibit my powers and gain fame? That is not the way. I could even secretly pass on my powers to him so that the good deeds he performs may soon bear fruit. This is the better way. Having come to this conclusion, Vishnudatta lifted up the girl and said, "Child, what is the use of crying? Listen to what I have to say. Experiencing the fruits of past actions cannot be avoided. It is so with me, it is also so with you. It is so even with Brahma. Who can change it? Sins committed in previous births manifest and torment us in the form of diseases. But there are atonements. They have to be performed scrupulously. Tuberculosis is caused by slaying a Brahmin. To expiate this sin, a rite has to be performed for 12 years with great dedication. Your father and the others here are all scholars. There is a book which deals with the consequences or results of any action, either in this or in a former birth and matured by time. I wonder whether you can act according to it." Sumedha's answer came like an arrow. "If you and my father tell me to jump into the fire, I shall do so. Save my husband. I shall do anything that is needed." Vishnudatta was pleased. Concentrating on the Lord mentally, he called the patient, who opened his eyes slowly and talked without effort. By that time, all the important Brahmins of the village had gathered there. After talking to them, Vishnudatta decided on the atonement according to the Shastra which deals with actions and their consequences. A religious observance for 12 years for the disease caused by killing a Brahmin, another 12 years observance for dropsy caused by sins against Vishnu, and a 6 years rite for acute gout, and 3 years observance for the fistulas and ulcers. After deciding this, Vishnudatta initiated Sumedha separately. When a particular rite was observed, the disease corresponding to it began to diminish. As the diseases abated, the Brahmin youth also began to participate in these observances, as far as possible for him. By the time half the observances were over, all the diseases were cured completely. The couple completed the remaining observances with great faith. When all the rites and observances had been completed, the couple invited Vishnudatta to their house for 3 days and accorded him the traditional 16 kinds of devotional treatment. Vishnudatta treated the girl as his own daughter, and touching the chest of the husband and blessing him, he told him to chant Datta Mantra to attain a righteous disposition, virtuous progeny, long life, health, and wealth. Then he returned home. "See, Devendra, now tell me, if Vishnudatta had told either Sumedha or the youth that the world is unreal, that there is neither birth nor death, that there is no disease at all, would they have understood? Would it have been acceptable if he had advised them to perform meritorious acts so they would be happy in their next birth? That is why Vishnudatta combined resourcefulness with power and caused that Brahmin youth's intellect to be absorbed in righteousness. Outwardly, atonement was the reward for those rites, but in fact, they were themselves the means to purify his intellect and therefore indirectly lead to liberation. Take the example of a child who is ill and should take bitter medicine. The child will cry and reject it. Then the mother, holding sugar candy in one hand and the medicine in the other, says, "You take the medicine first, then I shall give you a sugar candy." To get the sugar candy, the child, closing his eyes, swallows the medicine. Considering that it would be harmful if she gives all the sugar candy, the mother gives it only a little, and concealing the remainder and telling the child that it is all gone. No wrong is done by that mother. Indeed, it should be done in that way alone. Indra, the scriptures are like mothers to us. The worldly happiness shown by the scriptures is like the sugar candy. This samsara is only a disease. Reflection on the Mahavakyas, sacred utterances, one from each of the 4 Vedas, alone is the remedy. Indra, whatever the subject be, whether self-knowledge or any other subject, in imparting knowledge to others, one should proceed as shown in this story. To make it understood at a deep level, it should be repeated again and again in different ways. As another example, I shall tell you the following story, also relating to Vishnu Datta. 6. Systematic instruction. Indra, in a village to the north of Sahyadri, there lived a Brahmin by the name of Kundila. His wife Vishalakshi was jewel of a wife and also very attractive. Both of them were of a good age, and there were no elderly relations in the household. There was perfect harmony between them, and there was no scarcity of food and water. For them, the village was like heaven. One day, Kundila had to go to town on some major work. It would take at least 1 month to go and return. Here was the young wife with no other companion in the house. Yet he had to go, and making all necessary arrangements, he departed unwillingly. Before he left, he gave 1,000 warnings. Be careful. If anyone knocks at the door, do not open it without looking out through the window. As soon as the sun sets, bolt all the doors and stay inside the house. Thus he gave her plenty of good advice. The young wife lived in fear during his absence. A Brahma Rakshasa was then roaming about in those regions. In a previous birth, he had been a brahmachari, a bachelor, by the name Jhantiga, and had studied the Vedas. Yet he had been prey to misconduct. Therefore, no one had given their daughter in marriage to him. He had taken to evil ways, and as a result of some hostility, had died an untimely death. After death, he had become a spirit and was now wandering about in that area. After he had become a spirit, his lust had increased enormously. Whenever he felt like it, he harassed the female spirits and also women. Whenever he saw young women alone, he came in disguise and treated them cruelly. He was an obstinate spirit who could not be subdued even by a magician. Ever since Vishalakshi had married, he had set his eyes on her. He hesitated to trouble her, however, because he knew that her husband was a Vedic scholar and regularly performed religious rites. But when he learned that Kundila was going away, he became bold. He assumed the form of Kundila and came to Kundila's house as soon as it was dark. The deceived wife, believing that the person who had come was her husband, felt very happy. With her face shining with joy, she asked, "How come you could return so soon?" With a politeness he did not normally possess, the Brahma Rakshasa said, "I met the person I had to see on my way, and he told me to come to see him after a month." The young wife was filled with joy. That night, the virtuous wife indulged in amorous sport, believing that demon to be her husband. She was just astonished at his ways, and after some time she experienced unbearable agony, and overtaken by heart-rending terror, she began to cry, and cried till dawn. As soon as it dawned, the Brahmarakshasa, under the pretense of going to work at another village, went away. I shall return by evening. Be watchful, he said. For that innocent girl the day was agonizing. She sensed that he must be some horrible demon, yet his form completely resembled her husband's. But how could she bear this pain? She could not disclose her suffering to anyone. When it became dark again, fear gripped her. The husband brought a big basket full of jasmine flowers, tied garlands of flowers all over Vishalakshi's body, and showered flowers all over her. As on the previous evening, he waited until midnight. The pain suffered by the girl that night cannot be worse, even in the terrible Raurava hell. The more the fiend tormented her, the more satisfaction he derived from it. Several days and nights passed thus. She was certain that he was some fiend and not her husband. But whom could she tell? Who would believe her? Her heart used to shiver at the very thought that he was coming. Due to her fear of him and of diseases, she became as thin as a straw, with the bones of her cheeks and chest protruding. Her hair was falling out, and half her head was already bald. Her eyes were full of wretchedness, her face full of fear, and her mind full of anguish. Lacking the strength and courage even to die, she existed as a living corpse. She did not notice how many days passed in that way. As soon as the month was over, her real husband came back. On seeing him, she was frightened and began to tremble. When he saw that his wife looked like a corpse, her husband was alarmed. After a short conversation, it became clear that he who had come now was her real husband. She was about to tell him everything when Jantiga ran in yelling, "Who are you? Coming in my disguise? You are dallying with my wife?" His infatuation for Vishalakshi had driven him to this impudent bravado. He now even dared to come in broad daylight. On seeing him, Kundila staggered at first, but he was soon overcome with rage and began to fight with Jantiga. Abusing, striking, and pushing each other, they fought in the middle of the road. All the men and women of the village came running there. They stared at the combatants with open mouths. Both were identical in looks, voice, in details of dress. In every respect they were replicas of each other. But both of them couldn't be the real Kundila. How to distinguish between the false and the genuine one, no one knew. Just like others, Vishalakshi also did not know. But it was certain that the one who had just come home was her husband, whereas he who stayed all those nights was the Rakshasa. But she could not recognize her husband when both were fighting. All she knew was that he who had lived with her for a month possessed the strength of a demon, whereas her husband was of a gentle nature. However, both were now fighting each other with equal vigor. It was not possible to say who was stronger. What could she do? When the elders of the village thought it over, they recollected the affair of Jantiga. It was known that he was extorting women. This could be his evil doing only. They realized that he had made himself bold to come to their midst in disguise. Now was the time to put him down cleverly. So they approached both of them and separating them said, "O youths, we are unable to know who is the real Kundila. Therefore, we had better ask the elders. Then Vishalakshi can follow her real husband." They took the two Kundilas to Vishnudatta, who was residing in the neighboring village. When Vishalakshi, who had somehow recovered by now, saw Vishnudatta, she was overcome with grief, fell down at his feet and began to weep. He immediately understood the whole situation. He also recognized the Rakshasa right away. But, he thought, if the people think that I recognize the demon by some divine power, no one may talk freely. After a while, wicked suspicions may arise in the minds of a few that I have been boasting or have shown partiality. A doubt of some sort or the other may occur to them. Therefore, it is good to devise a means by which they can know definitely who is genuine and who is the spirit. Thinking thus, he decided upon a plan. Following the convention of the elders, he comforted the girl, and remembering Lord Dattatreya in his mind, looked at both of them, saying, "Youths, a small test will have to be conducted to find out which one of you is real and which one is false. Although it is an insult to the genuine one, both of you should consent to the test." With folded hands they agreed. "Sir, is it not for that purpose that we have come to you?" They both showed great humility and reverence. Then Vishnudatta called his disciples and asked them to put a hot seal K on the face of one and D on the face of the other. The seals were applied, but they did not know that they had been consecrated with mantras. Afterwards, Vishnudatta sat on one side along with the elders of the village and made the two youths and Vishalakshi stand on the other. Then Vishnudatta called K and told him, "Describe all the articles, clothes, ornaments in your house and the identification marks on Vishalakshi's body." As he was describing these, Vishnudatta had the description taken down by the elders. Then he asked D to do likewise and also had that description taken down. Afterwards he asked Vishalakshi also to describe all this, and it too was written down. The elders compared the three statements and came to a decision. Yet Vishnudatta said that it was better to verify again. This time Vishnudatta called both K and D and said, "This Matapura is spread over 5 kroshas. There are different temples around it. Both of you should go around the town and come back only after seeing the deity in every temple. He who returns first and describes the distinct marks of the respective deities as proof of his really having gone round will be considered winner." As soon as they heard these words, both of them started running. D came back first and described all the distinct marks of the deities which the elders took down. He said, "I have come first. Vishalakshi is mine." The elders said, "Let us wait for K to come." K came back at noon. He also reported all the marks of the deities. The elders could not come to a decision. The report of both was identical. Only one moved fast, the other not so fast. By this alone they could not say who was genuine. Then Vishnudatta smiled and said, "Let us see after conducting another test." Addressing the two, he said, "O youths, we have heard that a number of yogis are living on this hill. You have to go round the hill and return after collecting the names and gotra, lineage, of these yogis." D asked, "Will he who comes first be the winner?" The elders confirmed this. D was naturally full of enthusiasm. He ran with doubled zeal, thinking, "I have been successful in one test. Some are on my side. The decision is delayed as a few have opposed it. If I win in this also, then Vishalakshi will be mine." K too doubled his efforts. D returned in a short time. The elders took down all the names of yogis he mentioned. He boasted proudly, "I had the support of God. That is why I have been able to perform this test so quickly." After about 3 hours had passed, the second one came back, dragging his legs, and dropped down exhausted, saying, "I went round the whole hill. there were no yogis at all. Vishnudatta had him revived, and after consulting the elders said, "Youths, we have already come to a decision. Yet, since there should be no haste in such an important matter, we are conducting one more test. It is the last." Vishnudatta had hardly spoken when D got up and said, "Tell us quickly." K remained sitting, looking disinterested. Then Vishnudatta had a bottle brought and said, "Youths, he who squeezes himself into this and comes out again can take Vishalakshi with him. We shall take care of the other one." Chuckling gleefully, D assumed a subtle form and pushed himself into that bottle. Vishnudatta, who was just waiting for him to do this, closed the bottle with a special stopper and sprinkled consecrated water over it. The spirit inside struggled and raved, but unable to overcome the power of the mantra, rolled about and fell down inside the bottle. The elders who saw this were overcome with joy and applauded. Vishalakshi and Kundila caught hold of Vishnudatta's feet, and Vishalakshi began to cry. Lifting her up, Vishnudatta asked why she was crying. Sobbing, she said, "Oh Vishnudatta, please prescribe some atonement for me." Vishnudatta asked with surprise, "Atonement? Why atonement for you?" She could not reply. She was crying so much. The women around her understood, and with tears in their eyes, in appreciation of her sense of virtue, they explained the reason to Vishnudatta. Kundila, hearing those words, moved away a little from Vishalakshi and listened to Vishnudatta, who began in a serious tone. "Vishalakshi, Lord Datta is pleased with your sense of virtue. Kundila, listen carefully. I am explaining this to you in the presence of the elders. Jantiga is now mere wind. All that has happened is the prank of the wind. If an untouchable spirit possesses a Brahmin, will that Brahmin become an untouchable? Therefore, Vishalakshi is absolutely free from the sin of contact with another man. The Venerable Maharshi Atri, who gave birth to Lord Datta, has ruled that no stigma attaches to the woman who has been the victim of force. Then, where is the question of stigma in the pranks of wind? Some men interpret the code of virtue rather harshly in regard to women. It is a sin in the world to do so. Therefore, Kundila, do not allow that supposition to enter your mind. Vishalakshi, do not spoil your mind by entertaining non-existent and hypothetical doubts. You have suffered the torture of hell for a month. None of the sins have stuck to you. Carry on your marriage with righteousness and be happy." When they heard Vishnudatta's decision with regard to righteousness, all the elders corroborated him with quotations from different Shrutis and Smritis. The faces of Vishalakshi and Kundila shone with joy. They prostrated to Vishnudatta, who blessed them. "Live happily, endowed with faith in the performance of your religious duties." Later, Vishnudatta had that bottle buried by his disciples in the burial ground. He had all the guests stay in his house that day and sent them back the next day. See, Devendra, how Vishnudatta bound the Brahmarakshasa who was pestering the inhabitants of that area. He knew beforehand who the spirit was, yet he conducted the tests. After the first test, all the elders of the village thought that D was the spirit, but they were not sure. It was confirmed by the second test. Still, doubt lingered in the minds of a few. By the third test, all doubts were dispelled. Then, in the fourth test, the spirit was apprehended. Thus, Vishnudatta demonstrated step by step to the residents of the village who was the real Kundila. Even in the matter of identifying the real Kundila, which was a problem for the villagers, a gradual method of instruction had to be employed. How much resourcefulness is then needed in the teaching of something which is beyond mind and speech and transcends proof? If a man cries as though he himself is suffering, when his wife, children, friends, or relatives suffer, then for him the doctrine of Charvakas, which teaches that you are limited by your body, will be of some consolation. To those who believe that the body is itself the Atman, mantra and other shastras teach that there is a power which controls this body and the worlds, and that by worshipping it you may obtain visible results. That way they stimulate devotion to God. Mimamsa and such other shastras which say that if you perform noble deeds, you will obtain a better body and experience great happiness eventually, make you understand that you are different from the body. Then it becomes easy for the Vedanta Shastra to make you apprehend your real self, which is different from the gross, subtle, and causal bodies and is one. Therefore, Devendra, understand that there is no conflict between the Shastras. After all my explanations, you may still doubt why there should be so many steps. Would it not suffice if there were just one or two? O King of Devatas, the essential nature of Brahman is incomprehensible. Even if Mahatmas, who have gone quite near it, slip a little, there is the risk of their taking the adjacent road and thus going far away from the truth. To clear the doubts of these persons, therefore, doctrines are needed which, though seeming to agree on the surface, have very subtle differences in their conclusion. To illustrate this, I shall narrate another story concerning Vishnudhatta. 7. Last step. Pratishtanapura, where Sumati Devi, a jewel among virtuous and devoted wives, lived, is known to you already. There was a Brahmin to whom, after being childless for a long time, a son was born. The Brahmin was fairly well off and also was righteous. Since the son was born after he had been childless for so long, the Brahmin brought him up with much love and care. Apart from the desires entertained by parents with regard to their children, there are also the tendencies each child has in himself. The boy was not only stupid, but was also obstinate. He did not mix with others or have the least interest in playing with his equals. His teachers were unable to understand how such a stupid child had been born to such a great scholar. The father came to the conclusion that he could only have a minimum of education. But seeing the boy's stupidity increasing day by day, he was alarmed. The boy was always alone. He talked to himself or laughed and wept and even rolled in the mud. Thinking it might be madness, the father had medicines administered to him. Fearing that he might be possessed by evil spirits, he had amulets tied to the boy. Yet the result was nil. The father gave him the sacred thread in the hope that if he were to wear it and utter the Gayatri mantra, he might improve. But thereafter his behavior became even more strange. It was a headache to his mother to make him perform the religious practices. However much she told him to, he did not perform Sandhya Vandana. In spite of remonstrations, he used to urinate wherever he liked. When he should have been silent, he would yell. For him there was no distinction between what to eat and what not to eat, between what to say and what not to say, and between what to do and what not to do. He was not bothered about putting on clothes. His parents were desperate. They undertook many rites, such as the chanting of prayers, doing austerities, disciplines, fasts, giving gifts, and going on pilgrimages for the boy's sake. But nothing helped. At last, the parents approached Vishnudatta with the boy, and prostrating to him, they told him of their distress with tears in their eyes. As soon as he saw the boy, Vishnudatta's face lit up, and the boy's face did also. Seeing the brightness in their son's expression, the parents were surprised and happy, thinking it was Vishnudatta's greatness and his impression on the boy. After conversing with them for some time, Vishnudatta told them to go and have a bath and finish their rites. The boy would stay with him for a while. As soon as they went away, Vishnudatta, looking deeply into the boy's eyes, said, "Mahatma, who are you? What is the unfinished work for which you have taken this body? What can I do for you? Why have you come here under the pretext of accompanying your parents? O Lord, tell me frankly and openly." Hearing these words, the boy said slowly, "Have I come? Have I work with you? Since I pervade everything like the water deluge at the end of creation, what is the meaning of my going to a place or coming from a place? What is there for me to do or cause to be done? Is there any place where I am not? I am Atman only. I am myself Sat Chit Ananda. I alone am food. I alone am drink. Where is doership or enjoyership for me? These words do not apply to me, for I am non-dual, one without a second." Vishnudatta, who was listening to the boy's words with immense joy, was overcome with emotion and, hugging him, said, "Mahatma, that alone is truth. I agree. But I have a question to ask. Even though you are liberated while in the body, why do you not conduct yourself in a disciplined way and set a good example? Seeing you, some ignorant persons may behave as you do. If it is known that you are a liberated soul, even the virtuous may be ruined by following your present way of life. When it is so, what do you lose by being a good example to all? It is not up to me to admonish you. There is nothing unknown to you, who always revel in your own self. Perhaps you may have a misgiving that if you fall into the trap of karma, these attachments and bondages may stick to you again. May I ask just one more question? Do not misunderstand me. Why are you so much afraid of bondage? If you fear this, what is the use of your knowing that supreme reality where there is no fear? If there is duality for you, then you may fear. But are you not saying that you are one without a second? I am not asking these questions to blame you. Think for yourself. Are attachment and bondage real? Renunciation of identification alone is liberation. When sin and merit do not cling to even a common man, provided he gives up the notion of I am doing, then how can they cling to you? Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho bandhasya vishayasangi mukter nirvishayam manaha. If the mind grasps and attaches itself to objects, it produces bondage. Otherwise, it produces liberation and bliss. It is thus with the mind of the bride who has just married. Though engaged in domestic work throughout the day, she will remain happy and buoyant because her mind is fixed on her husband. It is mind alone which is the cause of bondage or liberation. If the mind is under your control, why should you be afraid of actions that take place outside of you? Does liberation exist somewhere in heaven or in the netherworld? It is not there. It is here, within you. Liquidation of the ego in the mind is itself liberation. You have achieved this already. Then your fear is only an illusion. There is no room for fear. There is no second. Therefore, why cause others to weep? Of all people, why should the parents who have given you this body, which is the field for discrimination, be made to weep? Living in the midst of people, why are you setting them a bad example? Therefore, O Mahatma, follow the worldly path for some time and please your parents. Later, if you so desire, go away from the world and live as you like. Do not fall from the state of non-dual experience by entertaining unnecessary and unworthy fears. The boy listened with open eyes to these words, but remained silent. Then Vishnudatta took him inside for a bath, and had food served to them by the virtuous Sushila. Seeing their son behaving so differently, the parents were overjoyed. They were filled with wonder at the greatness of Vishnudatta, who by his mere presence had controlled the disease which had not subsided even after so many medicines, mantras, and other techniques that had been used. By the time the boy had eaten the food served by Sushila, all the particles of fear hidden in the corners of his mind had left him completely. Vishnudatta and Sushila smiled to themselves when they saw him prostrate to the feet of his parents after the meal. Bowing down with gratitude and overflowing joy to Vishnudatta and Sushila, the happy parents left with the boy. The boy conducted himself in an agreeable and respectful manner as long as his parents lived, and afterwards he became an ascetic. Did you see, Mahendra? Even after reaching the height of the subtle ultimate principle and attaining the state in which he saw his self in all and the self of all in himself, a little bit of fear remained in the boy. Such a man at one moment considered himself as one without a second, and yet was afraid of bondage at another moment. No wonder that laymen, in whom the immanent Atma never shines, in deep sleep too grieve that they do not know who they are, and believe that they are doers and enjoyers and want knowledge of the self. Regardless of the eminence of a person, it is possible for him to choose the wrong path. That is why different shastras had to be developed to impart instruction to different sadhakas with the different qualifications. Mahendra, thus different shastras have been written to instruct the sadhakas step by step according to their level. They are ancient and not any novel creations. Now, let me know your opinion. Reflecting upon the words of Brihaspati's detailed explanation and grasping the truth in them, Devendra prostrated to the Guru's feet and said, Gurudeva, pardon me. I spoke without thinking, but now I know that what you have said is true, and left with a treasure of new knowledge. Now, Kartaveerya, what do you think? Lord Datta looked smilingly into Arjuna's eyes. Bowing down to the Lord, Kartaveerya said, Lord, I now understand by your grace that all the Shastras lead to one goal, and the notion that they are contradictory is mere delusion. Now I have no doubts whatsoever. Whichever the Shastra may be, he who follows and practices it thoroughly achieves fulfillment. But he who entertains useless doubts and worries about what this Shastra says and what that Shastra says wastes his time. My Lord, I understand this by your kindness. By your grace, my mind is now serene. Now I lack only the knowledge of the self. Pray, bless me so that interest in other things may be destroyed and I may spend my entire life devoted to Brahman. Instruction of great statements. Emphatically, the Lord replied, Kartaveerya, even the illusion of a fool will be destroyed if he listens to these 7 illustrations and reflects upon them. If that is so, no wonder then that doubts are destroyed in the case of aspirants like you. You had asked for dharma, artha, and kama, love, the third of the 4 aims of life, before, and I gave you them. Now you are asking for liberation. I shall also impart that to you. He who asks for food should be given food. To the thirsty, water should be given. To the sick, medicine should be given. What an aspirant really wants, that alone should be given to him. Now you are asking for the knowledge of your real form. Listen. Arjuna, there are really no 2 categories such as the bound and the liberated souls. You will come to understand this later. It becomes clear to us from our own experiences that the visible world is impermanent and unreal. We can deduce from the logic inherent in the Vedas that though visible, it is unreal, like a dream. Because you have realized this, you have discarded the desire for enjoyment and want to know the eternal. But where does this world, which is a flux, originate, and how? That the entire world has emanated from the fundamental, eternal, and real Atman itself can be known by the evidence of the Shruti, which logically examines the 3 states. Atman alone exists. Veiled by ignorance, it appears as the pluralistic world. Just as a rope can be taken for a snake, Atman appears as the world. Therefore, since delusion causes one thing to appear as another, reality must be examined carefully and with discrimination in order to know it. Then it will be understood that it was not a snake but a rope. Similarly, when examined with the aid of the scriptures and their logic, it will be realized that the non-dual Atman of the nature of Sat, Chit, Ananda alone exists, and everything else is only an illusory appearance. For this, a pure mind is necessary. To purify the mind, obligatory daily rites should be performed faithfully, and one should not engage in any prohibited actions. The fruits of one's actions should be dedicated to God with devotion. One should worship, serve, and meditate upon God. The Guru should be worshipped as God. By following these guidelines, the mind will become pure. A pure mind can then easily understand that the world is impermanent, unreal, and only an illusion. Through this, the mind attains detachment. Such detachment, together with the Guru's grace, produces an insight into the nature of the world. Consequently, the aspirant will achieve the 4-fold means of liberation, namely, discrimination between the eternal and the transitory, indifference towards the enjoyment of the fruits of one's actions, either here or in the hereafter, the 6 endowments such as Shama, control of mind, and Dhamma, control of sense organs, and an intense longing for liberation. After having followed Shravana, listening, Manana, reflection, and Nididhyasa, intuition, the aspirant will grasp the Guru's instructions when the Sadguru then imparts the great teachings such as Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art, and others, and their deepest meaning. Then he will come to experience that Tat, that Brahman, Tvam, meaning you, Asi, meaning are, and realize there is no difference between the two. That is, you are not two. That alone you are that only. And that is the supreme state. That alone is the state of non-dual bliss. That alone is liberation. Arjuna, I have taught you the most secret doctrine of Vedanta. As you have a purified intellect, you can understand the real meaning of my instruction. You asked me, whom are you meditating upon? I meditate upon the Atman, about which I taught you just now. I have taught you the same absolute principle, Atman. Arjuna, you have performed righteous deeds for a very long time, dedicating them to me. Thus, steadfast devotion to me has developed in you. That is why purity of intellect, detachment, and longing for liberation have arisen in you. Now you have obtained from me the teachings about the ultimate reality. If you have still any doubt, I shall clear it. Kartaveerya, who had listened to the Lord's enlightening instruction with a single-pointed mind and had ruminated over its meaning, prostrated to him with devotion and said, My Lord, I have achieved jnana, knowledge, by your grace. There are no doubts in me at all. But what I have heard is not yet firmly established in my mind. I am not experiencing constant bliss. Bless me, so that constant bliss may dwell in my heart. Acquisition of Yoga Empire. The Lord, with an encouraging smile, said, Kartaveerya, to experience bliss, this uncontrollable mind should be curbed. Is not mind alone the cause of bondage and freedom? But it is not easy to control the mind. Elders say that it is as difficult to control as the wind. In fact, it is even easier to control the wind than to control the mind. That is why followers of yoga control the mind by controlling the breath. The mind and the breath are like a pair of horses. If one becomes unruly and does as it likes, then, pulling the reins of the second, the first also comes under control. Similarly, if we are able to control breath, the mind also comes under control. If you accomplish purity of mind through righteous deeds and with a purified mind, achieve victory over breath and thus control of the mind. Only a follower of yoga achieves control of the mind by controlling breath alone. Breath is the external form of the life force. It is to be taken in through the left nostril, following the procedure taught by the Guru, and held. Then it is to be left slowly through the right nostril and held, and then exhaled slowly through the right and held, and is to be left out slowly through the left nostril. This technique is called pranayama, or regulation of breath. If this method of pranayama is practiced well and sincerely, all the nadis, pulses, nerves in the body become pure. then the power to practice the yoga technique single-mindedly without interruption is achieved. This pranayama can be performed both with mantra and without mantra. Practicing this way, the aspirant triumphs over life breath. Then, by the power of the mind, sense organs should be withdrawn from objects and merged into the mind. This is called pratyahara. Eventually, the mind should be concentrated on Atman. This is dharana. This is the step where great care is to be exercised. The mind runs away again and again. With consistent practice, it is to be brought back and established in Atman. This is called dhyana. After making the mind steady through pranayama and then with steadied mind reconciling the scriptures and the great sentences taught by the Guru, meditation should be done incessantly. This perpetual meditation of absorption is what is called dhyana. Deliberating upon the meaning of the great sentences like Tat Tvamasi with the aid of the 6 constituents: 1. Beginning and ending, 2. Repetition, 3. Specialty, 4. Reward, 5. Appraisal, and 6. Reasoning. The supreme reality, which is the goal of the great teaching, will become known. Then, removing lust, anger, which are alien to that reality, set in motion a continuous current of the thought, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. This state is called Nididhyasana. It is also called Savikalpa Samadhi. When in this manner the thought, I am Parabrahman only am I, is maintained uninterruptedly, endlessly, and steadily, like the flow of Ganga, then the highest consciousness pervades that state of mind. This consciousness flashes in the mind just as a spark of fire lights cotton through a burning glass. The aspirant in whom there is not even an atom of unmindfulness and who is in a constant state of awareness alone can apprehend this. The state of mind which causes the reflection of the highest consciousness to manifest in the mind reveals the absolute Brahman, which is the substratum for that reflection, according to Shakha Chandra Nyaya, and disappears. At that time, Atman shines alone. The division knower, known, knowledge dissolves. This is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. To the yogi who has attained such a state, supernatural powers such as anima, etc., come effortlessly. The whole problem lies here. If one misuses the supernatural powers, however, one falls from yoga. Recollect now from where we began. Did we not start with an exploration of what was beyond, after determining that both this world and the other are as unreal as they are impermanent? Then, if one does not realize that these 8 supernatural powers are also impermanent and are thus a danger, and one makes use of them, what else can be attained other than a fall? Therefore, the yogi should exercise vigilance in this aspect. Then there is the problem of mind. As long as it exists, vigilance is necessary. When it becomes restless and moves from side to side, it should be brought under control. On the other hand, if it dissolves and falls into sleep, it should be thrashed and awakened. The state of the mind in which there is neither agitation nor dissolution and is without any modification is called Kashaya Pakwa state. That is true equipoise. When it is attained, the yogi remains like the flame in a place sheltered from the wind. The triads do not exist anymore. There are no movements. There is no enjoyment of bliss. The knot of the ego is cut. All doubts, such as inconsistency and contrariety, will be shattered. Except prarabdha, all other karmas will be destroyed. He will remain in the state of Brahman. He is liberated while living. He is the emperor of the empire of yoga. Arjuna, out of love for you, I have taught you this very secret yoga. It should not be taught to the unworthy. One should not practice without being instructed by the Guru, and only by hearing about it from others or by just studying books. Before obtaining direct experience, it is best to obtain indirect knowledge through a Guru. That is why I described it to you in so much detail. Arjuna, I know that your heart is longing for direct experience. When I am here, how could I not fulfill your wish? Look at the beautiful cave over there. It is a convenient shelter for your practice. Go into that cave and sitting firmly and keeping the backbone, head, and neck straight, contemplate upon the truth by way of yoga instructed by me. Within a short time, you will thus attain samadhi and the highest fulfillment. Saying this, the Lord placed his right hand, which showers the nectar of bliss, on Kartaveeryarjuna's head. Thrilled, Kartaveerya embraced the Lord's feet and with his permission entered the cave and commenced practice in the manner taught by him. When Lord Datta blessed him thus with the contact of head and hand, no other practice was required. As soon as Kartaveerya started practicing, he became as motionless as a pillar and soon was absorbed in samadhi. 1 year and 1 month passed that way. When he became aware of his body again, he got up slowly and, approaching the Lord, prostrated to him. The Lord lifted him up and hugged him to his heart. Seating him by his side, he asked, "My son, did you achieve fulfillment? What was your experience?" Arjuna said, "O my Lord, sitting in the cave, when I began to meditate upon you, the sense organs, including the mind, merged into the highest consciousness. It was a state of supreme bliss. Merged in that state, I did not experience the triad, nor did time exist anymore. I think that I experienced incomparable bliss for just a moment or so. Then my prarabdha karma pulled me back into the gross body again. O Lord, your feet were my refuge. By your infinite grace, I have conquered samsara and achieved the blissful ultimate state. Now there is no longer any duty for me. I have done all that had to be done. I have known all that is to be known. I have achieved all that had to be achieved. Now I do not want anything other than the experience of Sat Chit Ananda. Whether this kingdom remains or is lost, it is all the same to me. To me, floating in supreme bliss and fulfillment, the whole world appears to be full of the essence of blissful consciousness. There is no differentiation, such as time, space, or object. Everything is blissful consciousness itself. I cannot even perceive any distinction between you and me. Gurudeva, I have been blessed with this by your grace. You are the primordial supreme reality. You are yourself the Atman. The whole creation, microcosm and macrocosm, appear in you alone. Lord, By your grace, this truth I now know with absolute authority. Gurudeva, your compassion is infinite. You have blessed me with the highest reward for serving at your feet. Immersed in overflowing devotion and gratitude, Kartaveeryarjuna prostrated to the Lord's feet and remained thus. The Lord, with a gracious smile, lifted up the beloved disciple and seated him next to him. Kartaveerya said slowly, I have no other duty now, my Lord, except your command. Do you want me to stay here or to go into the cave again? Direct me. I am looking forward to your orders. The beauty of the Lord's smile was like the sun shining when he said, My son, first finish your bath and the daily duties, then have some food and rest. See me after 6 months. 6 months later, Kartaveerya came back to Lord Dattatreya. The Lord completed the day's ablutions and the next day, before entering into Samadhi, told him to come back after 1 year. Arjuna abided by that instruction and returned a year later. The delighted Lord made him sit by his side and said, O my son Kartaveerya, of all the disciples, you are the most dear to me. I have given you all that you asked for. Only one thing remains. You asked me about my conduct, and I will answer you now. You know now what is to be known. Nothing more remains. Therefore, neither you nor I have anything to do with conduct. There is no fear of karma for a yoga siddha. In fact, he is beyond fear. Neither wicked deeds nor virtuous deeds touch him. He is wrapped in Atman alone. Nothing else exists for him. Therefore, there is no question of dharma or adharma. This is the highest truth. Yet, I have been observing dharma, consisting of the ancient varnas, classes, and ashramas, stages, and other religious practices and duties. I did so to set a good example to the youngsters who follow the elders' authority. If I begin to conduct myself contrary to dharma, then others who follow me out of reverence will be ruined. Therefore, I perform religious duties for their sake. Only stupid people seeing me with women, liquor, and meat are deluded, thinking that I am acting against dharma and I am devoid of dharma. They do not know that to destroy the sins and sufferings of some devotees, I have to appear in ugly disguises. What do they know about Dattatreya's ways? I am an Avadhoota, but you are a householder. For you it is necessary to practice dharma always. In fact, you, an accomplished soul, are not bound by this rule, but you cannot escape from it for the sake of maintaining world order. Therefore, my son, conduct yourself accordingly. In this world, only an accomplished yogi and he who has attained the fearless state, which transcends mind and speech, are floating in supreme bliss. Therefore, Kartaveerya, have no fear. Go back now and rule your empire. Protect your subjects. Appease the gods, the ancestors, the wise Brahmins, and others. Come to me often and remember the Sadguru with devotion. Do not ever forget, even for a moment, the contemplation of your true nature. With a single-pointed mind, meditate on the truth I have taught you. Never allow arrogance to come near you. May auspiciousness be yours always. On hearing the Lord's commands, Kartaveerya got up and prostrated to the Lord's feet with devotion. With tears of joy, he pressed the Lord's feet to his eyes, again and again, and put on his head the dust of the Lord's feet. Then he bowed down separately to every one of the Lord's followers and unwillingly left. Seed of arrogance. Kartaveerya continued his rule over his empire with more power, heroism, and nobility. He performed thousands of sacrifices and gave away gifts. He was considered matchless among kings. If anyone has beauty, might, youth, wealth, learning, and power, the seed of arrogance can arise without him noticing it. Kartaveerya possessed all these, and in such abundance as any man could have. Besides that, he possessed superhuman powers graciously given to him by Lord Dattatreya. Therefore, it is not at all surprising that arrogance arose in this man, who had so much worldly might, superhuman powers, and extraordinary fame. Seeds of arrogance had taken root in the inner core of Kartaveerya's heart even before he achieved fulfillment in yoga from Lord Dattatreya. The boons which had been granted by him earlier were not ordinary ones. After the sudden death of Emperor Kritavirya, father of Kartaveerya, tributary princes began to extend their borders. Kartaveerya had to subdue everyone who was boasting that he was a hero not merely among men but also among devatas, danavas, demons, yakshas, a class of semi-divine beings, and gandharvas, celestial musicians. Ultimately, he issued an order to the effect that no one except himself was allowed to carry arms. While doing all this, he was taking care to see that symptoms of arrogance did not arise in his mind. But arrogance is sometimes hard to detect. It squeezed itself into the emperor's heart under the guise that he was defeating arrogance. When his eyes fell on Brahmins, contempt was in his mind. When I acquired so much extraordinary and superhuman power under the protection of Lord Dattatreya, none of these Brahmins who live on roots in the woods took it seriously. They behave as though they alone are great ones, and what they alone teach is dharma. They are always exhorting people to bathe, to give gifts, and to perform rites. They make people bathe in rivers at dawn in winter when the river is frozen, under the pretext of Maghasnana. Though they have performed all the dharmic rites, they do not seem to have gained anything except a few coins. Then by performing what rites have I gained so much power? It is only the reward of surrendering to the feet of Lord Dattatreya. Don't they see that all other religious observances are futile? At least by my example, why don't these Brahmins understand the facts and approach Lord Dattatreya to seek refuge in him? As if his possessions were not enough, he had a celestial chariot which could travel in all the three worlds as he wished, and so he had contempt even for the devatas, who tremble at the mere mention of these Brahmin ascetics and spread out a clean cloth for them at every step. This was just one part of his mind. In the other part, discrimination between the eternal and the transitory brought him back to disinterestedness and longing for Lord Dattatreya's grace. In the end, by Lord Dattatreya's blessings, coronation in the empire of yoga was waiting for him. Although Kartaveerya obtained self-knowledge by the Lord's grace, there was still the impact of innate tendencies on his conduct. Nevertheless, devotion for Lord Dattatreya grew steadily.
Sadguru Stavam.
Siddhi Buddhi Mahayoga Varaniyo Ganadhipaha Yasvayam Sachchidanandam Sadgurum Tam Namamyaham Yasya Dattatreya Bhavo Bhakta Namatmadanataha सूचते सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् योगाज्योतिः समुद्दीप्तम् जयलक्ष्मी नृसिंहयोः अद्वयम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् योगविद्याचित्रभानुम् चित्रभानुशरद्भवम् ज्ञानदम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् गणेशहोमेऽर्कदिने नित्यम् श्रीचक्रपूजने दीक्षितम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् अगस्त्यमुनिसङ्क्रान्तनानावैद्यदुरन्धरम् भवग्रम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् वाद्योदञ्च दिव्यनाम सङ्कीर्तनकलानिधिम् नादाभ्यम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् दत्तपीठाधिपम् धर्मरक्षणोपायबन्धुरम् सत्कविम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् विदूतभक्तसम्मोहमवधूतम् जगद्गुरुम् स्वाश्रयम् सच्चिदानन्दम् सद्गुरुम् तम् नमाम्यहम् साधुत्वम् भक्तिमैश्वर्यम् दानम् योगमरोगताम् सन्मतिम् ज्ञानमानन्दम् सद्गुरुस्तवतो लभेत् श्रीगणेशाय नमः श्रीसरस्वत्यै नमः श्रीपादवल्लभ नरसिंह सरस्वती श्रीगुरुदत्तात्रेयाय नमः कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलम् परस्मै श्रीसच्चिदानन्दपदे अर्पयामि।